Carl, what advice would you give to, those parents who are really neurotypical, really linear thinking, like they definitely don't think in pictures, they think in words. I'm describing myself, like I never think in pictures, it's always in words. And so sometimes I'm frustrated with my child because he can't do things that come so naturally to, other 5-year-olds. But at other times I'm amazed. Like it's his ability to recall things in its smallest detail. I remain flabbergasted. So what advice would you give parents like me, um, who are struggling to see the world as their, let's say, neurodivergent children do? Like, is there any little tip just to help us?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really simple. For me, it's do Davis, and everything else is a distant second. In fact, every other method that I've ever looked at, particularly on the learning disability spectrum, that learning disability label spectrum that we talked about in the other videos, for me, it's Davis, and everything else is an unbelievably distant second, because Ron is getting to root cause. So if we're talking about dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, ADD, ADHD, dyscalculia, auditory processing disorder, what else? There's a list of 70 of them, so I can't remember all of them. Those are the ones that I deal with the most. Any sort of academic difficulty of any kind, then I would say Davis, and everything else is a distant second. Some people will learn to do things like reading and writing using the traditional phonics methods, but in English, they're only going to be about 50% successful because only about 50% of the English language is phonetical. You can't decode about 50%. That gets into a whole other topic, which we could discuss if you want.
And
But if you're on the
parents
learning
parents
level,
will learn as well. If their child does Davis, the parents sit in on the
it
test.
depends. So it depends on what's going on with that child. So if you're on the learning disability label spectrum and you want to understand it and sort of get inside your kid's head and really help them, then to me, it's the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, The Gift of Learning, and those are the academic type questions. If you're on the autism spectrum, then you're going to be looking at the book Autism and the Seed to Change, reading that book, looking at everything Davis. Go online and just Google everything to do with Davis, and you'll begin to meet people like me, other videos. A lot of the videos that are short are really just more of an introduction sales pitch. If you really want to understand Davis, you've got to call a facilitator, get on a phone with them, talk with them in person and say, okay, what's this all about? Hence we're doing these videos. But for me, really, and I'm blatantly biased and I don't mind saying it, but I got here after 40 years of experimentation on myself. So if you've got a 10-year-old child who's got one of these learning disability labels, you can experiment for 10 to 12 years. You can trust the school system. But the fact that you've got a learning disability label, the fact that you have focusing issues, that you might have an IEP, that you're not reading at grade level or are reading at grade level, the fact that you have focusing issues,
Or you're on a modified program right from kindergarten.
Yeah, in fact, you've got any of those things going on, that's the school system telling you, we can't help you. But they don't want to.
They'll put you on a modified program in kindergarten,
Yeah.
and then the gap just keeps on growing. So how are they supposed to integrate in grade 3?
So what parents don't realize, and this is the difficulty, and I'm not blaming parents, it's just the penny hasn't dropped with them. So if you have a kid who basically your parents or you yourself as a parent or the teachers or somebody is saying, I think this kid might have a learning problem. Okay, that's strike one. Strike two is you go and get a psych ed assessment. Okay. Strike three is it comes back with a label of some kind. Whatever label you want to put on there is 70. Take your pick. Right. The next is if you have an IEP in school. Right. The next is if their literacy is bad. Right. The next is if their focusing has difficulty, and as a result, it's so bad that you might need medication. Okay. Seventh is you're actually taking medication to help with all of this. So that is 7 strikes against the schools. What the school is telling you, what the system is telling you, is your kid doesn't fit into our system. Right? They're a nice kid, you're a nice parent, but there's not a fit. Right? What we've got doesn't really work. But it gets hidden behind this exploration of these 7 points that might take you anywhere from a year to 5 years to figure out. And then what happens in my case, most parents come to me, they've been trying to figure this out for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they get turned apathetic. So I say, if you've got just one of those things happening, it's time to go do Davis.
So what would you recommend? Sorry, in Quebec, there are to my knowledge at the moment, there are no current Davis facilitators. So what should somebody in my situation do?
Well, depending on your age of your child, you can go online. There is an online program done via Zoom. I think that's going to continue, but I'm not sure. It happened during COVID. Some people do very well with that. Some I found, some do not. So it's a mixed bag there. So you can explore that. And I think I'm not sure if it's going to continue as the COVID sort of goes down, but it has been so successful for some people that they may well keep it. Obviously, get on a plane. I mean, I traveled to Texas to get my problem solved. So when I have somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I live in Ottawa, and I have some people who don't want to travel from Canada, which is about a 30-minute drive. I sort of shake my head and go, wow, well, I've traveled to Texas to get this help. So, and San Francisco. So, 20-minute drive isn't much for me.
Well, one thing that I know about moms and dads is that they will sometimes they will travel for hours to get their children the help they need.
I've had clients come from Montreal. I've worked with about 5 now, I think. And what they do is they come to Ottawa, they stay in a bed and breakfast or a hotel. Now, obviously, if you have a very low income, you're not going to be able to do that. But if you're on a low income and you're not dyslexic yourself, then you can get Ron's books and you can actually deliver a program with those books.
Because he describes quite a bit.
Yeah, and there are exercises in that book which are basically what I call the literacy program, or program number 1. Incorrectly, I'm not allowed to call it the program number 1, but it's basically called the Davis Dyslexia Correction Program. It's a
lot more effective and easier on the parents to lead.
Yeah, and I've had parents do that. I've had homeschooling parents that will take the time to do it, but it does take a little bit of time, and you've got to put the time and effort into it. And for some people, that seems to work well at doing that. But for some people, they have such a history of trying and failing, or the parents don't have time to do it because they're working, then a facilitator is really the quickest, simplest, and most effective, and quite honestly, the least expensive way of doing it. I've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars doing it the traditional methods, and it just didn't work for me. At best, it was about 50%. But again, like we said in another video, if you can read at grade 6, you can go and be a carpenter, but you're semi-literate.
But I just, since you mentioned that, there's something that always boggles my mind. And when you were in carpentry school, I guess we would call it that, you had to write essays, right?
Yeah.
Why? It just boggles my mind. Why would you be required to write essays?
Well, there's 2 parts to any skill set, right? So any skill set that you have, there is a practical element to it, and there is a theoretical element. And the theoretical element you have to study. So I remember from my studies, because this is how my woodworking brain works. I trained as a furniture maker. So there are 5 ways of creating a curve in wood. And I still remember to this day, 30 years after writing it up and doing it all and studying it. And they are cutting from a solid, cutting from bricking, steam bending, laminating, and post-form ply. And I can remember that 30 years on, and I haven't really read it 30 years on. So there's that academic. So as a furniture maker, I have to be able to apply that theoretical, because I can't study all of those in the practical. Then there's a practical side of it. Can you actually build a chair? So what I found really interesting is people that were very academic. There was a woman on my course who was a complete grade A student. She'd come from an academic background, and she was sort of retraining because she really liked antiques and wanted to have an antique shop. So she came and did the same course I did. She was older than me. I think she was maybe 40, 45, something like that. And she, a lovely person, could do all of the theoretical side easily, like so easy, but she struggled on the practical. But she said, Carl, how do you do that? And I was like, I'd show her and I'd show her again and I'd show her again and I'd show
And
her
she would
again.
work harder and harder and she still wouldn't achieve what you could achieve.
Yeah, and I could, I could do it in half the time, with greater accuracy, and that was my gift, right? That was the gift side of it. And she would look at the things I make, and she couldn't even begin to get her head around it because she was very lineal thinking, and I was thinking in pictures, which we know is the Davis skill. And so I would picture what I wanted to make, and then I could take it apart and put it back together in my head, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. But if you asked me to write an essay on that, there's no way I could have done it. But I could have drawn you a picture and I could make it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But she could have written, a 10-point essay on exactly all the procedure to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But she couldn't actually physically do it. So there are two skill sets, and you have to prove that you know the theory. And there is some logic behind that. Now, as a corrected dyslexic, I go, yes, there is huge benefit to the theory.
But could you deliver it as an oral exam, or, making
well,
a
the
video?
problem with that, you can't always do that. And reading and write, that's where school is trying to cheat the literacy difficulty. So they'll say, we're going to give you a computer and you talk to text. Okay, so I sit here and I talk for 10 minutes. I talk in a big circle, and I have to go back and I have to edit it. Right? Well, if I don't understand sequence because I get disoriented, I can't do point 1, point 2, point 3, 4, 5, right? Which is what lineal thinking does. Okay, so I can't edit it. So there's no point giving me a computer if I can't edit it. Then I've got to have the teacher assistant come in and edit it. And that all happens from school. So what ends up happening is we essentially BS the kid and the parents that you're reading at grade level. When you leave and try and sit your driving test, you can't sit your driving test because you're reading 3 years below your grade level. And there's a theory to driving and there's a practical exam to driving. You need to know both.
And that's where Davis comes in.
Yeah. The other big thing about Davis really is, again, we're getting to root cause. We're understanding what's causing the problem. So we're having an effective, fast method to deal with all the difficulties you're having. So that's, and looking back, yeah, I had all those difficulties. I've now changed because I've done Davis. So if you were having this conversation 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Carl, our time is up. But
Okay.
I want to thank you so much. And if anyone is near the Ottawa area, or if they're from Quebec, or all of your contact information is below. And I highly encourage any parents to just call you or just look at your videos, which are so informative and so great. And, we always want to do all we can for our children or for ourselves.
I hope that answered your questions. It's been lovely doing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you would like to find the nearest Davis facilitator to you, you need to go to the links below. They'll be listed in the description somewhere, depending on which channel you're watching this on. If you want to find the nearest Davis facilitator to you, I suggest you go there and just follow the links. If you're interested in training as a Davis facilitator, then again, just go to the links below. You'll find training there. Or if you're looking for a program for yourself, you can also go to those links. My suggestion, if you are really interested in Davis, the best thing to do is to pick up the phone and start talking to a Davis facilitator closest to you, because they will be able to answer all of your questions. That's it for now. See you in the next video.